The night sky was dark and silent, the stars shining brightly against the black canvas. In the shadows, a figure moved quietly and purposefully, cloaked in the darkness. This was the Shadow Man, an unknown force of the night who stalked his victims with a relentless obsession. The Shadow Man had a taste for the macabre and a hunger for the thrill of the hunt. He was a predator, a master of the night who used his skills to pursue and capture his prey. His victims never saw him coming, for he was a creature of habit, moving silently and fading in and out of the darkness. The Shadow Man was a mystery, a dark and twisted psychological thriller that left his victims paralyzed with fear. He was the ultimate predator, a force of nature that could not be stopped. His victims never knew what hit them, for the Shadow Man was always one step ahead. As the night wore on, the Shadow Man continued his hunt, his presence a looming threat in the darkness. He was a force to be reckoned with, a true master of his craft. The Shadow Man was a legend in his own right, feared and respected by all who knew of him. In the end, the Shadow Man remained a mystery, a dark enigma that left behind only his victims and the terror they had experienced. He was a creature of the night, a force to be feared and respected, and his legacy would live on long after he was gone. For he was the Shadow Man, the ultimate predator, a master of the night. The night was still and quiet, the perfect backdrop for the Shadow Man's hunt. He moved with a cold and calculating precision, his senses honed to a razor's edge. The Shadow Man was a master of the night, and he was determined to find his victim. As he stalked through the darkness, the Shadow Man's figure seemed to fade in and out of view, as if he were a mere shadow himself. He was a predator, a force of nature that could not be stopped. His eyes scanned the shadows, searching for any sign of his prey. The Shadow Man was a dark and twisted psychological thriller, a force of evil that could not be stopped. He had a hunger for the thrill of the hunt, and it drove him relentlessly forward. His victim was out there, somewhere, and he would not rest until he had found them. The night wore on, and the Shadow Man continued his pursuit. He moved through the darkness like a ghost, silent and unseen. His prey was close, he could feel it. As he drew closer to his victim, the Shadow Man's heart beat faster in his chest. His senses were heightened, and he was ready for the kill. He moved closer and closer, his prey still unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. And then, in a flash of movement, the Shadow Man pounced. His victim never knew what hit them, for the Shadow Man was a master of the night. He had found his prey, and he had claimed his prize. As the night drew to a close, the Shadow Man disappeared into the darkness, his presence a haunting reminder of the evil that lurks in the shadows. He was a force to be feared and respected, a predator that could not be stopped. For the Shadow Man was a master of the night, and he would always be a force to be reckoned with. The Shadow Man had found his victim, and he was ready to strike. He moved silently through the darkness, his figure fading in and out of view. He was a force of nature, a dark and twisted psychological thriller that left a trail of terror in his wake. As he approached his prey, the Shadow Man's heart beat faster in his chest. He was a master of the night, and he knew that this was his moment. He moved closer and closer, his senses on high alert. And then, with a sudden burst of movement, the Shadow Man pounced. His victim was caught off guard, their screams echoing through the night. But the Shadow Man was relentless, a predator that could not be stopped. As he made his move, the Shadow Man reveled in the thrill of the hunt. He was a creature of habit, stalking his victims with a relentless obsession. But this time, he had outdone himself. His prey was helpless before him, and he reveled in their fear. For the Shadow Man, this was what it was all about. The hunt, the thrill of the chase, the power that came with being the ultimate predator. He was a force of nature that could not be stopped, a master of the night who knew no equal. As the night wore on, the Shadow Man disappeared into the darkness, his victim in tow. He was a haunting presence in the night, a reminder of the evil that lurks in the shadows. He was the Shadow Man, and he would always be a force to be reckoned with. The night was silent and still, the darkness broken only by the faint glow of the street lights. The Shadow Man had made his move, and he had gotten his prey. He moved through the night with his victim in tow, a haunting presence that left a trail of terror in his wake. The Shadow Man reveled in his victory, the rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He was a dark and twisted psychological thriller, a force of evil that could not be stopped. And he had won. For the Shadow Man, this was the ultimate high. The thrill of the hunt, the rush of the chase, the power that came with being the ultimate predator. He was a creature of habit, a relentless hunter determined to get his prey. And he had succeeded. As he moved through the night, the Shadow Man felt a sense of satisfaction wash over him. He had done his job, and he had done it well. His victim was helpless before him, their fear palpable. The Shadow Man was a master of the night, and he knew that he would always be a force to be reckoned with. He reveled in the darkness, the shadows, his natural habitat. He was the Shadow Man, and he had won. And as the night wore on, the Shadow Man disappeared into the darkness once again. His presence was felt, but never seen. He was a haunting presence in the night, a reminder of the evil that lurks in the shadows. And he would always be the ultimate predator, a force of nature that could not be stopped. The Shadow Man had left his mark, a haunting presence that would never be forgotten. He was a dark and twisted psychological thriller, a force of evil that could not be stopped. He had become the ultimate predator, leaving a trail of terror and destruction in his wake. As the news of his latest victim spread, the city was gripped with fear. The Shadow Man had left his legacy, a haunting reminder of the evil that lurks in the shadows. People were afraid to go out at night, the darkness now a symbol of the predator that roamed the streets. The police were working tirelessly to catch the Shadow Man, but he remained elusive. He was a creature of habit, a relentless hunter, determined to get his prey. He was a master of the night, and he was the unseen force of evil. And, despite their best efforts, the police could not stop him. The Shadow Man had become a legend, a figure of terror that would be talked about for years to come. His legacy was one of fear and destruction, a reminder that evil can take on many forms. And as the city tried to come to terms with the Shadow Man's reign of terror, he continued to move through the night, a haunting presence that could strike at any moment. He was the ultimate predator, and he had left his legacy. The Shadow Man had won, and he would never be forgotten. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The Shadow Man continued to haunt the city, stalking his prey and leaving behind a trail of fear and destruction. No one knew where he came from or what his ultimate goal was, but everyone feared him. The police had tried to catch him, but he always seemed to slip away into the shadows, leaving them empty-handed. As time passed, the people of the city grew restless. They lived in constant fear, never knowing when the Shadow Man would strike again. Some people even began to believe that he was immortal, a supernatural being that could never be stopped. But one day, the Shadow Man simply vanished. He disappeared into the night, leaving behind a legacy of terror and chaos. No one knew where he had gone or what had become of him. Some people believed that he had finally met his match, while others thought that he had simply moved on to another city to continue his reign of terror. And so, the legend of the Shadow Man lived on. People still talked about him in hushed whispers, wondering if he would ever return. But for now, the city remained in peace, and the darkness was once again a place of mystery and wonder.